Narayana Samarambam Vyasa Shankara Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitartaya Tattva Bodha Pt.12. Okay, in the last video we concluded our discussion about the qualifications. And the qualifications, the fourfold qualifications, sadhana chatushtaya, are a description of a mind that is prepared or open or ripe, you could say, for gaining self-knowledge. And a quick way to remember these qualifications is as the 4 D's. All right. D number 1 is discrimination. Discrimination between the self and the not self. Discrimination between Atma or Anatma. Or you could say that it's the discrimination between you, okay, what you are, and what you are not. Right? So that's D number 1. D number 2 is dispassion. Okay, dispassion for what? Dispassion for objects. Okay, for anything that you can know or experience. Dispassion for that because you can see that objects can't give you the freedom that you really want. You have dispassion for the results of your actions. Now, the results of your actions are objects, but it bears mentioning separately, okay, because dispassion is talked about as not being, as maybe indifference to the results of your actions. That just means what? The same thing. That you know that those results are objects, they can't give you the permanent freedom that you want, and also knowing that the results of any action is temporary. For that reason too, they're not going to give you any kind of lasting fulfillment or satisfaction. And when you analyze action and the results, you can see that although you have some control over how you do an action, once the action is done, you don't really have any control over the result itself. So knowing that the results of your actions won't give you permanent fulfillment, permanent freedom, and knowing that those results aren't exactly under your control, then you don't have to be overly concerned with the results of your actions. Obviously, you do actions with an intended result in mind. You obviously go to work with the intention of getting a paycheck. Okay, you put ingredients in a pan on the stove with the intention of making a particular dish, a dish that is edible. Okay, you have an intention for what you want out of an action, but you don't have to be obsessed about it. You don't have to be worried about it, because how the action turns out isn't under your control. So you can just do things to the best of your ability and relax. Okay, that is dispassion, D number 2. D number 3 is discipline, the 6-fold discipline. I'm not going to go into each one of those here. If you don't remember what they are, you can go back to the video about the 6-fold discipline and review those. Okay, so the 6-fold discipline is D number 3. And D number 4 is desire, namely an all-consuming desire for freedom, an all-consuming desire for self-knowledge. You can see that objects are not going to give you the freedom that you want. So you go for freedom directly. meaning you go for self-knowledge, you go for the understanding of what your true nature is, you go for the understanding that you already are free. So this doesn't mean that you renounce your family, leave your home, quit your job, and go live in a cave. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you've seen what objects can give you, and you appreciate that for what it is, and you know what objects can't give you, and that's freedom, self-knowledge. Okay? So before you understand that, your priority in life, your number one priority is to get objects for the sake of happiness, for the sake of freedom. When you understand the defect or the flaw in objects, then you make freedom. You make the pursuit of self-knowledge your number one priority. Okay, so keep going to work. You obviously need money to live. Enjoy your family and friends for what they are. Okay, they can give you moments of happiness or moments of pleasure. This is true, but trying to get freedom from those relationships is incorrect. Okay, you can appreciate those things for what they are. You can do the duties that are necessary to maintain your life, but here, mentally, in your mind, you are making the pursuit of self-knowledge your number one priority. You have to have that burning desire. Those are the 4 Ds that describe a mind that is prepared for self-knowledge. All right, there's no test here, okay? There's no test that you can take that shows how qualified you are. That isn't really the point here. The point is not to think of yourself as being qualified or unqualified or categorizing yourself in one way or the other. And it's definitely not the point to be judgmental of yourself or hard on yourself. Okay? The qualifications are just meant to, well, they're there for your information. What we're saying here is a qualified or prepared mind understands the teachings easily and assimilates the meaning. So the reason that we're talking about these qualities, these qualifications, is to say that as you're listening to the teaching, if you're not understanding, if you're not assimilating the meanings of these teachings, then it can indicate that there might be some particular quality of your mind that is lacking, that needs to be developed. Okay? It doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't have to judge yourself. It's simply a matter of going, okay, well, maybe I need to work on my dispassion. Maybe I need to work on my discipline. Maybe I need to work on my desire. Maybe I don't have the proper amount of dispassion or discipline, or maybe I don't have enough desire for freedom. It's not a cause to get down on yourself. It's not a cause to be critical of yourself, but it helps to be honest with yourself about the level of qualification of your mind, especially if you are not understanding the teachings. Now, this text assumes that you already are qualified. And for the time being, that's what I'll assume about you too. Okay? This text doesn't go over how to get qualified. It doesn't talk about spiritual practice. That's enumerated in other texts, like the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, and that is the subject for a different video. So we've talked about these qualifications at length now, so I hope that that topic is pretty clear. So I guess we can go ahead and move forward in the text. We're continuing our study here of Tattva Bodha. So, after talking about the qualifications, the text picks up here and says, these are the fourfold qualifications that are required for making the discrimination between the self and the not self. This discrimination is necessary owing to the fact that the self, which is ever free, limitless, and unchanging, is mistaken to be the not self, the body, mind, and all forms of experience. Owing to this ignorance, avidya, the self is falsely believed to be subject to bondage, limitation, and change. Thus, suffering arises, and a means is required to remove it. That means is the knowledge of truth arrived at by discrimination. So, in this portion of the text, what's being described is the nature of bondage. Okay, if we're talking about freedom here, then freedom implies bondage, right? Because we don't have to seek freedom or talk about freedom if there is no bondage. So here in this part of the text, it's describing what this bondage is, okay? And I'll repeat the section here. Discrimination is necessary owing to the fact that the self, meaning you, okay, the ever-free, limitless, unchanging consciousness, is mistaken to be the not self. Right? The not self is objects, anything you can know, anything you can experience. Here in the text it says the body, the mind, and all forms of experience. You can include also the external world. Okay, any of those things are objects. Any of those things fall into the category of not self. Owing to this ignorance, which in Sanskrit is called avidya, the self, meaning you falsely believe that you are subject to bondage, limitation, and change. Thus, suffering arises. A word for suffering that you're probably familiar with is samsara. So, what's the cause of samsara? It's ignorance, avidya, or misunderstanding. There's a mixing up. There is what you are, there's what you are not, but through this misunderstanding, you're taking the things that you are not to be you. Mainly the body and the mind, the functions of the body and the mind, the properties or attributes of the body and the mind. But what comes along with the body and the mind? I mean, what's the harm with identifying with the body and the mind? Well, it's that the body and the mind are continuously subject to limitation and change. And those are big problems. Just think about the body. All right, the body is born, so that inevitably the body is going to die. Right? Death is certainly a limitation. So if you're the body, then it makes it seem like you're going to die. That's a big problem. If you are the body and the body is constantly changing, the body grows, which isn't really a problem, but the body then gets old, and that tends to be a problem. Seeing your body age, seeing your body break down, that tends to be a bit of a problem. When you start to, losing your hair or something like that isn't such a big deal, but when you start to lose your mind or you start to lose your physical capacities, that's a bit of a problem. That's a limitation of the body. That's how the body changes. The body slowly becomes decrepit. The body slowly starts to break down over time. So if you're the body, then you are subject to that change. You get old, you become decrepit, you lose your faculties, you lose your physical vitality, and that is a big problem. It can be applied to the mind as well. The mind and the body only have so much ability. Your physical body can only do so much. It only has the physical strength to do so much. Your mind only has the mental capacity to do so much. You're only as smart as you are. You're not any smarter. You only have a limited amount of power and desire to get things done, fortitude, etc. So that's the problem with identifying with the body and mind. Okay? Saying I am the body and the mind, then it seems like you suddenly have all of the problems of the body and mind. Another one that I forgot to mention, of course, is pain. Pain is a big problem. The body is always subject to some kind of discomfort or pain, physical pain, and the mind is subject to emotional pain or disturbance. So, thinking you're the body and the mind, you're subject to limitation, change, pain, etc. That's the problem. That is the nature of bondage. When you are really limitless, unchanging, and free, there is an identification with something that is limited, always changing, and bound. So that's what's being laid out in the text here, right? It doesn't explain yet exactly how this happens. That's something that will be taken up later on in the text. But I will say this now. Someone may say, well, why are we ignorant of who we are? What's the cause for that? And it doesn't matter. Honestly, it does not matter at all. The only thing that's important is how to get rid of it. I mean, it's completely obvious that we don't know who we are. That much is obvious. If you can sit there and say, you know what, I don't know that I'm limitless, ever free, unchanging consciousness, then it's plain that you have a misunderstanding about who you are. So at that point, what's the help? What's the reason for knowing how that came to be? When you're sick, you're suffering from some kind of stomach ailment, and you go to the doctor and he says, hey, you've got a stomach ailment. You say, well, that's obvious. I already knew that. He says, okay, fine, fair enough. Look, just take this medicine and you'll feel better. You say, wait. First, before I take the medicine, tell me the nature of the stomach ailment. What kind of bacteria was it caused by? Where did that bacteria come from? How did it get into my stomach? And while you're at it, can you please tell me what the nature of this pill is? Who manufactured it? Who invented it? How does it work? What's its mechanism of action? Etc., etc. Why would you do that? Do you need to do that in order to take the medicine? No. What you're interested in is being free of suffering, being free of the ailment. So what? Take the pill. Take the medicine. Take the cure for the ailment. What's the point in trying to find out how it came to be or what the nature of it is, etc.? When there is a cure available, just take the cure. It's the same thing here with self-knowledge. You know that you have ignorance. Okay, fair enough. You can see that the ignorance is causing you suffering in the form of identification with the body and mind. Thinking that you're the body and mind. All of the problems of the body and mind become yours. That causes suffering. That much is plain too. There's misunderstanding and there's suffering. Now, are you interested in where the misunderstanding came from, how it could be, the nature of the suffering? Or when you're presented with this cure, are you more concerned about the cure, being free from suffering? I imagine that you are concerned with being free of the suffering. So the text will talk later on about the nature of ignorance a little bit more. But I would like to stress here again that if that question has come up into your mind of, well, why is it like this? I wouldn't concern myself with it too much. You're not really ever going to find a definitive answer for that. So you're going to waste a lot of time barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. When you could be putting time into doing productive self-inquiry that will rid you of the suffering altogether. All right, that's the whole point here. All right, so suffering is caused by ignorance. That ignorance is identification with the mind and the body. When this ignorance is in effect, suffering arises and a means is required to remove it. That means is knowledge of truth, meaning knowledge of what your true nature is, self-knowledge. Knowledge of truth arrived at by discrimination. In one of the past videos, we talked about how it says that discrimination here is the key. The problem is a mix-up thinking that I am something that I'm not. So when you have a mix-up, we have to have discrimination. Discrimination, again, can mean a distinction or to distinguish between two things. Okay, we've got to distinguish between what we are and what we are not. Okay, what we are, non-dual, limitless, indivisible, unchanging, independently existent, eternal, infinite consciousness that's ever free of action and experience, and all objects, the external world, the body, the mind, any aspect of those things. We have to make a distinction there. Discrimination is the key. So if anyone ever asked you, hey, what is the key to freedom? Well, it's discrimination, all right? What is Vedanta about? Well, Vedanta is a means to freedom. So Vedanta is a means for making this distinction between what you are and what you are not. That's the cause of suffering, and is ignorance, the mix-up. So Vedanta is the means to get rid of that. So it has to show you how to discriminate between what you are and what you are not. So that is the means, the knowledge of truth, arrived at by discrimination. What is the knowledge of truth? It is the settled understanding that the self alone is real, that you alone are real. All else, the not self, is unreal, and that I am that self, ever free of the body, mind, and experience. My nature, what I am, is existence, consciousness, limitlessness. So it's saying here, knowledge, or getting rid of ignorance, is enlightenment, is freedom. What is that knowledge? The settled understanding that the self alone is real. What does settled understanding mean? It means a clear and doubt-free understanding. You could say that it's a firm understanding. It has to be clear, has to be doubt-free, because something that's unclear or something that has doubts is not really understanding. So that's what we're saying here. That's what we're saying that knowledge is. It's clear, it's removing any doubt that you are the self, ever free of the body, mind, and experience. That you are existence, consciousness, limitlessness. That's what your nature is. It's getting rid of any doubt in that arena, making it very clear what you are not, any object, making it very clear what you are, non-dual, limitless consciousness, and understanding what that means. So it's the clear, doubt-free knowledge that the self alone is real, meaning you are what's real. And we've defined real as what? As something that never changes. Only something that is unchanging can be real. You can't say something's real that is one thing one moment, one thing the next moment. You can't say that something's real when it's not here, and then it's here, and then it's not here again. Okay, anything that appears or disappears, undergoes any kind of change, cannot be real. Okay, so it's the clear understanding that you, the self, are real for the very fact that you do not change. The word for that is satya. We've talked about satya before. Satya is a word that describes you. It means to be unchanging. It means to be eternal, meaning not subject to time, always existent, never not existent. And it means to be independently existent. Okay, something that exists without depending on something else. Again, I'm going to refer back to the ring one more time. Okay, the shape, the circular shape here, and the name that we give the circular shape, ring, both of those depend on something else. Okay, without this circular object, we're not going to have a word that refers to it. So the name kind of depends on the shape here. So ring depends on shape. If we don't have the shape there anymore, if this was flat or something else, there's no ring. All right, now the shape, does it exist independently? All right, we've said that the name doesn't exist independently. It depends on the shape or the form. Does the form exist in and of itself, by itself? No, it doesn't. It depends on the silver. So in this case, if we just use this here as an illustration or a metaphor, we can say that the name and the form are mithya, okay, something that only seems to be real, something that depends on something else for its existence, and the silver would be satya. So we're saying that the self is real, and that means that consciousness is something that exists on its own. In fact, consciousness is existence. They're the same thing. We're saying that it exists on its own and does not depend on any of the objects. Now, if you think about it, you'll see this is true. This is part of the inquiry. You'll see that objects are not real because they continue to appear and disappear. Right? Each one of your experiences starts and then ends. Okay, you just think of all the experiences you've had in your life. Where are they now? They're gone. There was a time when they started. There's a time when they ended. And therefore, they cannot be real. They must be mithya. But does consciousness come and go? No. Consciousness is there the whole time. Consciousness is that by which you can even say that those experiences came and went. Consciousness is the unchanging factor that's there amidst all of the different experiences, amidst the coming and going objects. And so we are saying that it is unchanging, meaning you are unchanging, and that it also exists independently, because consciousness doesn't need objects to be there to exist. The various objects come and go, but the consciousness remains there unchanged. So you remain there unchanged as the objects come and go. So you are real, you are satya, unchanging, eternal, ever present, and independently existent, and not depending on any of those objects. The objects change. The objects depend on consciousness to exist, so they are mithya. All right? So we're talking about the clear, doubt-free knowledge that you are real, satya, and all else, the not self, meaning objects, experience, is unreal, meaning that it changes, meaning that it depends on consciousness to exist, the way that the name ring and the shape ring depends on silver to exist. And when that's clear, right, so we say, this is what I am, this is what I am not. I'm not convinced of the reality of the world, of the body and the mind. I'm convinced of my own reality. And what am I? Okay, I'm clear about that. What am I? I am the self. I am ever free of the body, the mind, and experience. My nature is existence, consciousness, and limitlessness. This is the knowledge that is freedom. This is the knowledge that is moksha or enlightenment. And as the text says, this is the knowledge that is arrived at by discrimination. And in the next video, that's the topic that we're going to take up. Okay, if we're saying that discrimination between what you are and what you are not, between the self, the not self, between Atma and Anatma is the key to freedom, then it's obviously a very important topic and we need to understand it clearly. So what discrimination is, how to do it, will be the topic of the next video and essentially the topic of the rest of the text. And so we'll discuss that next time in the next video. Purnamidaf, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam.